if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, there is another way. That's really all I'm saying. Like everything else, it starts with the first step. How do you admit that you are powerless? Well, the first step, the way that it worked for me when it finally worked was I realized I had already done the first step, meaning I had already realized I was powerless, meaning I had already been brought to my knees multiple times by things more powerful than me. Hey, I'm H4L. I make videos about mental health, addiction, and recovery. Welcome to the channel. I could easily admit that I didn't have the power to stop using, but not the powerlessness. And I realized the last time that the steps were difficult, I wanted to surrender. I wanted to be able to do all of these things the steps ask, come to believe in a higher power. A lot of it is just kind of assuming that if you just decide that you believe those things, that in several months you'll understand what they mean and you'll be clean. So will it really matter whether you believed it at the time or not? That's the last time for me that it was difficult. And then the time that it was easy was so much worse. It was more obviously a rock bottom. So it was pretty easy to realize that I was powerless. I didn't have to, I didn't have to believe it. I just already knew it. The first 3 steps are about surrender. And usually if you're having trouble with these steps, it's because you want to maintain control. Usually because you don't actually want to stop using, or you want to stop using because you don't want the consequences, but you don't actually want to actually stop. And obviously, I mean, who wants to go from popping a bunch of Percocets every day to feel better to having to get up and go to a meeting and talk to a bunch of people and help somebody and pray and read and work out and do all that stuff and not get the same euphoria that you get from popping Percocet all day long, or drinking or smoking weed or whatever it is. And obviously, I mean, anybody would prefer to feel euphoric all the time. I mean, not really, but if you think of it from an addict point of view, of course it would be better to feel better. It would be more fun to feel better. It would be easier to feel better. But if you're at the point where you're trying to work the first 3 steps, or just the first step, you have proven to yourself that you are unable to manage it on your own. And that's what that is all about. I have a lot of experience with these steps, both when I couldn't accept any of the stuff, and now for the last 15 years, the steps are a way of life for me. Even when I don't go to meetings as frequently, I still live by the principles of the steps because I have no choice. I mean, that's the thing that a lot of addicts I hear, including myself, say that I'm grateful to be an addict because otherwise I wouldn't have been introduced to these steps. And, that probably sounds weird to a lot of people. But the fact of the matter is, the steps are an extremely fulfilling way of life. It's a spiritual program of action intended to get you in touch and contact with a higher power. And whether you are at that point and believe something else or whatever, once you have contact with a higher power and you start to actually see the amazing things that happen when you do surrender to God's will, and only pray for the knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out. Once you start living that way, you start seeing a lot of little changes that you probably wouldn't have expected to see. And it's a really fulfilling thing to be there for, because keep in mind, at least for me, if I was to start using, I would at some point end up in prison or dead. Or I would, have to get clean all over again, which would be like, it's so hard to do. The only thing harder is to do it again. And, I had to relapse and come back in so many times to realize that that was all that there was for me. There's either do drugs and it get really bad and have to come back into 12-step recovery, trying to start over all the way over again from nothing, probably out of prison or off the street or whatever. Or I can do what is now pretty much the safe, sure bet and just not use drugs. And that will mean that I can continue to be a father. I can continue to be in a position where I have something to give to people instead of a position where I'm doing nothing but taking. I mean, I wasn't like completely treacherous or anything, but it was not the kind of interactions with my fellow man that I have now. And, there are always going to be crazy things and hard things that happen and make it seem like, relapsing would be either a good bet or, fuck it, pretty much fuck it. That's what I always had. That was always my problem, is that I would say fuck it. I would know that I should do, and I know that I should not do, but I would just do. It doesn't take very long of that before you're in a position where you just have to start all the way over again. And I hope there are people that can hear that message and then not go out and have to learn it the hard way themselves. I know for me, I had to learn it the hard way. And I hate that fact because, I wasn't ready until I was ready, and I wasn't ready until I had an amount of pain, and I was able to take a lot of pain. And so it got really bad. And, I'm still rebuilding. After 7 years, I am still cleaning up wreckage of the selfish decisions that I made years and years ago, that when I think about it, I cringe and I hate myself and I get so mad. And then I have to remember that all of that too was part of the plan. It was part of God's will. It was part of the timeline. It got me to where I am now. And the question is now, what are you going to do? That's pretty much always the question. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? You're going to do the right thing. Usually if something is difficult, you should do it. And if it's easy, you should not do it. That's a good rule of thumb. And for anybody that wants me to keep going with this type of content, just leave a comment. There's one thing I'm an expert about more than anything else. It is using drugs and stopping using drugs. And all of the shit that goes with both. I've done both now for a very, very long time, back and forth. But to be in a position where I am multiple years clean, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for that fact. Because sometimes the only thing you have to fall back on when things get hard is what clean time you're going to lose if you fuck it up again. And it's a lot easier to say fuck it when you're clean for 2 weeks, 2 months, or even 2 years than when you've been clean for 3 years. And pretty much every day that I add on, the harder it gets to go out and screw it up. But make no mistake, I could go out and screw it up in the blink of an eye. Remember that a lot of people use substances and other things because they feel like they don't fit in, because they don't have, a tribe, a group. People are so alone these days, I imagine it's even worse than, when I was dealing with most of these concepts and struggling with them. But I didn't even know that it was because I didn't fit in. But you go to NA or AA and you go from using drugs to fit in to having a like ride or die network of people that has helped you and will continue to help you, and that you help. And it's a pretty beautiful experience, really, going from not fitting in so much that you're using drugs or whatever else it is, to having a place where you would say that you are grateful to have gone through all that pain because it bought you a seat in one of those rooms, which puts you into a group of people that is in every city, and your like special people at your home group and in your hometown will become your closest people. They'll be the people that know all of your stuff. They'll be the people that you call for help. And, the only thing you have to do to have that group of people is to have a desire to stop drinking or using. That's it, an honest desire to stop drinking and using. But I think they even took honest out. So as long as you claim to have a desire to stop using, you can go to those meetings. It's a pretty low bar. And the first, the first part is the hardest. It's where you see the biggest change. It's where a lot of the magic and the amazing shit happens. But it's when you start to have stuff that you actually can help people. That's when everything changes. When you go from, a rookie to a veteran, more or less. And people are asking you things and wanting you to help them. And you do, because you have to pay back the help that was freely given to you. And there's a ton of sayings that I typically kind of don't. I'm not a big sayings person, but they're all sayings for a reason. And, there's a bunch of them. And keep it simple, stupid, and 90 and 90. And there's a lot of like lingo and things, but the important part is that the newcomer is the most important person at any meeting. So when you are new, people are basically like, sometimes people will actually fight over who's going to help the newcomers. It's because that's where most of the helping others that's actually really helpful comes from. It's when you can actually share actual experience, strength, and hope in the form of the wisdom that you got from going through this whole process. And obviously you have to go through the whole process and stay clean the whole time in order to be in that position. And it's a great thing to actually get to that point. And the only way to get to that point is to start. And like everything else, it starts with the first step. And, there's always fear and a bunch of other stuff, but you go to a meeting or rehab or whatever and just start the process. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, there is another way. That's really all I'm saying. There is another way, and it's quite great. And I would hope anybody watching this that's actually, using, trying to decide whether they're going to do this or that, I hope you'll hear me say I was like one of the worst of the worst. I mean, people hated to see me relapse, but it kept happening. And it was because I wasn't taking the program seriously. I wasn't actually working the steps. And you can coast for, a little while, but you shouldn't. And when I say coast, I mean just on the good feeling that comes from joining this cool network of people and having places to go and things to do that are wholesome. So I hope anybody that's thinking about it will give it a try, because it's life-changing. So what are you going to do now? Until next time, this side or the other. Thanks for watching.